Hello lovely soda bubbles, I hope you're well. I'm Helen O'Connor and I'm just going to wait here for a while we get set up and while I see people appearing in the bottom of my screen, which I think is the way this goes. So in the meantime, get settled, and this is me, I'm Helen. I'm looking forward to speaking to you this evening. It's 7 o'clock UK time for our European and American bubbles. I'm not sure what time it is. I don't know if it's 7 also, 6 or 8. Only we seem to do this at this time of the year. But anyway, I'm looking forward to speaking a bit. Laura said that quite a few people have been doing a month off booze during October, Sober October, and that it would be a useful topic which comes up now and again to speak about what you do after a mob. But I'll ramble on a bit about me. Hi Joe. Rambling on a bit about me. I'm a psychologist. I work in London in private practice, but also within the NHS and the not-for-profit sector, and I typically work with clients outside of my private work who have drug and alcohol problems, and predominantly alcohol. So the majority of people are dependent on alcohol. There is a subset of clients who I work with who are not physically dependent, that is, the body doesn't get withdrawal symptoms when the person stops drinking, they don't need a detox, but they've become quite psychologically dependent on alcohol, and for one reason or another still want to reduce or stop. So I do see a lot of that kind of person, and developed a group to help those people because they're slightly underserved, I think, in the public sector, which is often focused on addiction and recovery, which has more of an abstinence agenda. It's great to see so many people here. I'm going to clear this writing because you now know that I'm Helen, I hope, and I do use alcohol in my life as socially, so I'm not an abstainer. I regularly do months off booze. I'm some way into a 50 days off as well, which I regularly do. If I don't do Sober October, I do a sort of November, December 50 days, and I do dry Jan, and I do usually a June or July. But that's not to say I drink daily in between. I don't drink every day at all, but I do like to have big stretches off alcohol as well, to remind myself of what alcohol can do, what it's like when you're not imbibing it at all. So I know I do sit in the group, your Club Soda group on Facebook, and I know that lots and lots of people are quitting and staying quit. I think that's absolutely fantastic, and I also know that there are people who use the group who lurk, as well as people who interact, who are looking to moderate their drinking, and are looking for ways to do that. But Laura did say that I should try and focus today's webinar on what you do at the end of a month off booze, or a period of time off booze, let's say a 50 day or a month or whatever, because the process of doing that for some people is just the beginning of a lot more change throughout their life. So I guess the first thing is to be really, really critically honest with ourselves, because going into a month off, what prompted that? I hate where drink takes me. I want to be doing more. I could be doing a lot more. I want to be more present in my life, whether that's work, family, spiritually, within the community, cracking on with creative projects and ideas, studying. And if alcohol was distracting you from other things you wanted to do, if that was why you started to do a month off booze or considered doing one, then it's worth thinking about, well, what's different at the end of this month? have I changed? Has the pressures I've got on me changed? Will alcohol have a different place in my life miraculously at the end of this month? And the answer is probably no. I think a month's excellent as a reset, and I think it helps us understand how drink had been affecting us. I'm not sure people who are doing the official mob and going through the course, or if they're just doing one by themselves, but there is periods of time to reflect and even track various, if you like, various metrics that are important to you, and to see how they change when you're not drinking. So sleep, relationships, mood, productivity, focus, and other things like that. Dietary control, which a lot of people find they have better control over when they're not drinking. And if those things have improved as a result of not drinking, then to kind of really honestly say, well, why do I want to give all that up? And to think about whether going back to using alcohol is going to be possible now and again, if it hadn't been possible now and again before that month. We do talk about using a month as a reset, and I do think that's a good thing to do. What I do know about the brain and the brain chemistry, though, is that it can take sometimes 3 to 6 months plus for the brain chemistry to, it's kind of like a soup, you know, it's bubbling away. When we use alcohol and other substances, it affects our brain chemistry. That's why we do it usually, because we often like the way it affects our brain chemistry, even if we also don't like the way it affects our brain chemistry or feels the next day. So with regular use of alcohol, whether it's, you know, giant binges a few times a week or a regular amount of drinking every day, in the evening, for example, your brain chemistry may take longer than a month to sort of find its own equilibrium. So it is worth contemplating a 2 to 3 month stretch to really see how things settle down for you. One thing that's often comes up for people that I work with is that, let's say, a more the general population will often find that symptoms of things like depression and anxiety tend to improve once they stop drinking. But there are also people who have severe and chronic enduring mental health difficulties, and they may find that those difficulties actually increase when they stop drinking. But for most people, things will get better as the brain finds its own equilibrium, and that relates to things like sleep as well as mood, our ability to regulate dopamine in more natural ways. And I would say that it would often take more than a month for that to come back for people, particularly if you're not able to return to drinking on a very occasional basis. So there's the degree of honesty. Why did I want to come off, take a month off in the first place? Are those reasons still there? Are they still important? Will starting to drink again hold me back from doing the things I want to do? And most people want to look for evidence that they can return to moderate drinking if that's their goal, and will want to run that experiment for themselves by trying to drink moderately. And we do have to learn for ourselves and test our hypotheses out for ourselves about whether we're capable of doing what we want to do. And there are people who are moderate drinkers who manage to be moderate drinkers as a result of really addressing the reasons why they drink in the first place, and finding other things to do other than drinking, and other ways to cope with life, and to enjoy socialising without alcohol. Because without finding those other solutions, alcohol will always fill that hole, plug that gap. So it is possible to do, and some people just need to try and do it, and just I propose a good solution is to sort of give yourself a fixed time frame. I am going to go back to moderate drinking for a month. I'm going to give myself until the end of November. I'm going to keep a log, a journal, a diary, or post in Club Soda group or whatever, as to how that's going and how I'm feeling about moderating. and then reflect back at the end of that month. So you do a month off booze, you do a month of moderating, and you reflect back on your month of moderating as well, and see how it went for you, if you drank more than you intended, if you were able to stick to what your intentions were. If you think the amount you're drinking moderately is an appropriate place to stop and stick, then that's great. I was reading on the board earlier, actually, some people were talking about, there was a lady, I don't know if she's here, who was debating whether to start sober or no November on the 2nd of November, because she had something to go to on the 1st of November that was alcohol based, and thought about doing her 30 days from starting from the 2nd of November rather than starting from the 1st. And people were suggesting about, there's no time like the present, but also that, moderating drinking on the 1st of November is also an option. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So I think it's worthwhile being really honest and critical about your goals. If you want to start drinking again, if that's your goal, why? Basically, why do I want to drink again at the end of the month? I drink, so I drink alcohol, and I drink once a week, usually in a social event where I'm out with other people, and one of my, if you like, rules is to really try and avoid drinking in the house, or in a house, and drinking by myself, and drinking for emotional reasons, because I did go through a period of heavy drinking when I was bereaved, which was my warning sign. But why am I looking forward to having a drink again? What is it about the idea of having a drink again that's so attractive and so appealing? One of my clients the other day, I'll call her D, letter D, was talking to me about some imagery she'd been using, because I often use the metaphor of a salesman. I think what's going on in the brain when we've been used to doing something for a long time is the brain is very good at pattern recognition. So when we start doing things differently, let's say we start watching TV, watching Game of Thrones without wine, the brain will notice immediately that something's amiss, because it's very good at pattern recognition. So it'll go, hang on, normally when you're watching Game of Thrones, you're having wine with your cheese platter or whatever it is, and you're not having wine, and then that's when this little bit of discomfort starts to creep in, because things are not actually normal for you for the time. And your brain is very good, because of evolution, thanks brain, at going, hey, hang on, you need to do this to make you feel good in this situation. I'm here to look after you, Helen, and I've noticed that you're not doing a thing that normally makes you feel good, makes you feel relaxed, so I'm going to try and remind you to do that thing. And then what starts happening, this is, if you like, the beginning of an urge or a craving at the mental level, and then if you're ignoring that craving, well done you, the brain will start almost shuttling more and more, if you like, persuasive memories of this thing that it wants you to do, because it's basically desperately trying to get you to do it so that everything goes back to normal and the status quo is maintained, and the wine is drunk and Game of Thrones is watched and everyone's comfortable. And I know Laura talks about managing discomfort more, and it's one of my big things. So anyway, I always use this, a metaphor of a salesman. There's basically a salesman rings on the door. That's the urge or the craving, and you hear the doorbell and you go and open the door ajar, and you see this salesman. And if you've ever not liked your relationship with alcohol before, this is a salesman who is basically coming back to sell you something that you've already bought before and realised was a bit of a dud. And if you take the chain off the door, and if you invite that salesman into your house and you let them show you the whole brochure, you know how attractive that brochure is going to be, and it's going to show you all the delightful images, the euphoric recall you may well have heard about, and it's basically trying to get you to buy the thing that it wants you to buy by showing you all of these wonderful, delightful images. And if you already know what alcohol does for you, why would you buy into that product again? And this is something that we battle with cravings, is the brain's trying to tell us to do a thing that will make us feel good, and another kind of more adult part of our brain knows that it isn't. But a friend, this client of mine called Dee, she actually said she started using this imagery of the salesman, but she's actually decided the salesman is selling used knickers or used underwear. So it's just a real kind of visual and maybe olfactory, I don't know, image that she's using. So when she gets a craving, she thinks, I know what you're selling, mate. I'm having none of that, thanks. I know the reality behind the glossy brochure. So I'm rambling on. This is something I'm fascinated by, is what happens in the brain with cravings. There's a really good book that I'm going to recommend in the comments or something afterwards. You may not like the philosophy of the whole book, but it's a book, it's based upon a form of a therapeutic approach called the Human Givens, Givens, Human Givens. And it very simply is based upon the principle that there are certain things that we need, and when those needs are met, we're much better equipped to handle other difficulties, including addictive behaviours and compulsive behaviours, including substances. But there's a really good chapter in that book which describes this whole process in the brain around a craving, what's going on when the brain is desperate for us to survive, because it doesn't realise that, you know, we're not going to die anyway if we don't have a drink, but it's desperate to perpetuate the species, so it wants us to do things that it remembers have made us feel good, even if that feeling was only temporary. So I'll put that book in the recommendations, because it's worth a dip into. I think you can often get it quite cheaply on Amazon as well, and it's another book. I always think, do research, be informed. There's some wonderful books now on drugs and alcohol and changing our behaviour around them, and they don't all have the sort of AA philosophy. Some of them are very scientific, some of them are more based around the idea of drinking being more like a habit amongst other habits, so focusing on things like the habit, the science of behaviour change and the science of habits. And there are other different therapeutic approaches, obviously, as there are for all problems. There isn't one therapy doesn't fit all. And it's about finding a philosophy, finding some models, some mental models, some images, some metaphors that really work for you. Now, I know I'm digressing a bit because we're talking here about managing cravings, but broadly this was related to the fact that if you're thinking about having that first drink on the 1st of November, really question why. Most people say to me when I say, what's your goal for moderate drinking? They'll say, I'll say, well, what's your ideal week like? Okay, well, I don't want to drink in the week, Monday to Thursday, or at home. I don't want to drink alone. I'd like to drink at the weekend, on Friday and Saturday, and maybe if I went out for a pub lunch on a Sunday, but if I'm not out, then I wouldn't. And certainly would stop drinking by, let's say, 4 o'clock on a Sunday. So they really are reining in their alcohol use from what for most people has become a daily habit. So I don't know where I went to when we got cut off, but I think I was talking about. Hi, great Rachel, I'm glad you can hear. I was talking about this idea of what you do at the end of the month, and people were saying, people who I work with a lot say, yes, my dream relationship with alcohol is, to regularly have months off, to not drink in the week, to not drink alone, to only drink socially, to keep it to the weekend. Which is great if that is something they can manage and doesn't interfere with any of their other life goals. But they will also invariably say that they're planning on drinking on the 1st of the month. And invariably the 1st of the month isn't a Friday or a Saturday. And the 1st of November is a Tuesday. So for anyone who is already thinking about what next, I would, again, this is about being really brutally honest, I suppose, and going, what would I hope my relationship with alcohol to be like if it was an ideal an ideal world? Some people would say, in an ideal world, I never would have tried any, like I felt when I smoked. I wish I'd never had one, and then I wouldn't want one. Some people might think, in an ideal world, I won't drink alcohol at all. Other people might say, in an ideal world, I still quite like the kind of buzzy fuzziness I get of it on a Friday and Saturday night, and I'd like that again, please. But none of the other stuff that comes with it. But if you're at the same time as having that as your plan, you are also planning on drinking on the 1st of November, which is a Tuesday and it's a weeknight, then there's a disconnect there between what you're saying you want your relationship with alcohol to be and what you're planning on it being on the 1st of November. So have a real think about if you are intending to be a moderate drinker and trying that, at least running in that experiment for yourself, put some real boundaries around that. It might not be about particular days of the week, it might be about times per week, it might be about units per week, it might be about drinking only under certain conditions, such as not in a bad mood, not to get to sleep. Whatever it is for you are your boundaries, and then stick to those. That's it. You know, if you enter into debates with yourself every night to find a reason, then that's probably, you know, again, more work needs to be done. That doesn't mean there's not a solution, but more work needs to be done. Because we do have this tendency to talk ourselves into anything we want to do, and to procrastinate and postpone. Oh, Janet, procrastinate and postpone the change. We definitely want to make the change, but we want our future self to make the change, and we don't want our present self to have to do it. And we can do that for an entire lifetime. My future self definitely wants to lose weight and start doing stretching exercises to help my lower lumbar spine pain that I have every single day. But I don't want to do that today. But future self definitely does want to do that and will definitely do it. But that's for future self to do. So we're all likely to buy into that procrastination about certain behaviours and changes, if not all, but some. So there is this sense of what is moderation for you, and that will be unique and individual. And I know there are government guidelines, but I don't preach government guidelines to any of my clients. I want them to decide what healthy level of drinking looks like for them, and that isn't just about healthy in terms of what it does to their body. I'm talking about healthy in terms of how healthy is the rest of their life when they are still drinking, because that's what we want. We want whole life health. That's our mental health, that's possibly our spiritual health. It's our actual, financial health for some people. It's their family health, it's their community. It's their ability to be creative. We want to have a healthy life, and it's about how much alcohol prevents us from having a healthy life in all of life's domains that are important to us. So that's a lot to think about, because obviously, it requires us to be, brutally honest about what we like about alcohol and when we want to use it, under which conditions. Somebody also earlier on in the Club Soda Facebook group was saying that they did try moderating, but it was so painful because it required so much extra effort. And that somebody else said it too. I'm not sure if it was Jill, but it required so much extra effort that it's almost easier to say no, I don't drink, than to say sometimes I do. Hi Nadia, thank you. We think of things as very binary. I think something like smoking, which I was on 40 a day, so I was a hideous smoker, a chain smoker. It is easier to say, I either smoke or I don't smoke. It's binary. The switch is off. Do you want a cigarette? No, thank you, I don't smoke. Would you like a cigarette? No, thank you, I don't smoke. Aren't you smoking? No, I don't smoke anymore. No, I've quit. I've given up. And actually, it becomes almost easier when the answer's no, because it's just one thing to remember. No, never again. No. Whereas moderation with drinking is not binary. It's a spectrum. It's like, there's lots of decisions to be made about moderate drinking. I work with people who have struggled with their eating as well, And again, you know, eating is something that people can't give up because it keeps us alive. And we have withdrawal symptoms when we don't eat, and it's called hunger. And as a result of that, I think I saw some scientist or some TED talk where they said some people make something like 563 or 2005, I don't know what it is, micro decisions about food and drink every day. I mean, it's a big number because it's not just about, you know, I must put a big lump of food in my mouth. It's what, when, how much, who, you know, all the preparation, planning, how much, the quantities, having something healthy versus having something unhealthy, having something convenient, but etc. So being a moderate drinker also involves lots more decisions, more micro decisions, more constant decision making. And for that reason, you'll probably find your days off drink in the week will be easier to do because it's just the off switch than it is to necessarily moderate what you're drinking on the nights you continue to drink, if that's what you're planning to do. And I think it's something that comes up at the end of the mob content, where I touch upon this, because obviously when we're sober, it's easier to commit to all of our decisions. It's we make a sober decision that we don't want to drink all night, and because we don't pick up a drink all night, we're constantly sober all night, so we're in far more control of our decision making. We are better at thinking of the consequences, we're better at thinking ahead, and weighing up the pros and cons of different choices. When we have had a few drinks, and it doesn't even take that many, we are then relying on our drunk brain, our intoxicated brain, to make all of the rest of the decisions for the evening. And if that one of those decisions is to stop after 3 drinks, the chances of the brain doing that after 3 drinks when it's intoxicated is much slimmer. So there's definitely this special kind of unique challenge in drinking moderately on the nights you drink, that's different from having nights off, because you've done a month off booze now, most of you, or many of you, so you know you can do nights off. You've done that, you can just do them for the rest of your life if you wanted to. But it's the days when you do drink but you don't want to drink too much that might require some work, because you will be fuzzy headed when you are relying on your brain to make wise decisions for yourself. So it's a bit of a challenge. I don't know, I mean, I've been talking relentlessly at you for over half an hour, and I'm not sure if anyone's got any questions for me. I know there was a lady did pop a message on earlier saying, what about people who are preparing for November or no November? And I guess this is a reflective time for preparation. I mean, I'll let the people on the Facebook group give you all sorts of support and their wise advice, born from all of their personal experience. There are people who've had months off and longer off, and people who've been alcohol free for a long time, and they all were at a point where they were making preparations to stop. So I'm sure you'll get lots of advice from the community. But I think, you know, it's a time for reflection. It's not the 1st of November yet. There's certainly something to be said for being cautious about how you're going to, let's say, use alcohol tonight and tomorrow night, because, you know, it's not yet the 1st of November, because if you're drinking more heavily because you'll soon be stopping, that's something to have a kind of conversation with yourself about, because it's setting up a sort of belief that drinking is something precious that you must consume lots of because you're about to have none of, and those are the kind of beliefs that you can work on over the month. But again, it's about maybe just thinking, well, why now? Why have I decided now to have a month off? For some people, it's a health challenge. They don't particularly have a difficulty with alcohol. They maybe want to lose a bit of weight, but drink doesn't interfere with their life much at all. But other people, I think, you know, really do have a concern about how healthy their whole life is, and how much they're achieving and getting done, and how much they're realising their potential whilst they're drinking alcohol as much as they do. And so it's time to have a sort of reflect, I suppose, about, well, what's alcohol stopping me doing? What would I be doing more of? Or what would I be doing better? What would I be prouder of? as a result of drinking less or not at all, and certainly not at all for this month. And also, you know, I think, you know, Beverly's just mentioned, do dates matter? Should we just keep starting or going? I don't think dates matter at all. I think we like, you know, we like the idea of a month. It's a nice sort of fixed moment in time. Like Mondays are the best day to start diets, and the 1st of January is the best day to give up smoking and all that kind of stuff. But of course, it doesn't matter at all. If it doesn't feel right, you can start. And if you're planning on starting on the 1st of November, but it's a Sunday night now and you don't really want to drink on Monday anyway, then you've started. You can get an extra couple of days out, you know, why not? And then you're really showing yourself you're in control, because it's not the 1st of the month, so you don't even have to do it. So, you know, if you're just thinking of giving up for this sort of slither of time, and all the other time before and after it will not be different, then that's maybe a slightly different belief about why you're doing it. But most people are already concerned about their drinking. If you're concerned about your drinking, tonight would be the best night to do something about that, even if it's having less, and then tomorrow night having none, and then you've already started, you know, a day early, which is brilliant. I think, you know, and again, you know, one day at a time is something that's trotted out a lot. People say it a lot, but the only day we can really affect is the day we're in. You know, we can't do anything about yesterday, and we don't know about tomorrow. So I do believe, you know, in a more mindfulness way, that the here and now, you know, the moment, and certainly the day we're in, is the only day we can have any influence over really about our behaviours and our choices. And you can learn from that day, and you can be proud about that day, and then you can take that into the following day. I think the concept of one day at a time is important, because we'll either find ourselves ruminating on the past, ruminating on all the things we've done wrong, ruminating on wasted time, wasted opportunities, and embarrassment and shame about behaviour perhaps, and we can't do anything about that yet because we've done it all. And we can also spend our time worrying about the future. What about? So focusing on the present day will help people who otherwise would tend to ruminate or worry, or both. So it also breaks things down for you, you know, counting down. Somebody was talking about counting down earlier, which I thought was a really nice idea, rather than counting up, counting down. And again, it's about finding little tools that motivate you, little things that are little micro achievements that all contribute towards your bigger goal, towards your Everest. And it can be an Everest, and sometimes, you know, we need to treat it like that. We need to get prepared, we need to do some training, we need to speak to some experts, we need to get the right tools, we need to understand what's going to happen. We then need to maybe spend time at various different base camps, acclimatising to where we've reached. You know, and for some people, a month off booze may be a base camp. It may be some acclimatisation where you have a chance to build up more skills and more strengths. And I think, I'm just reading another question. So, you know, sometimes people get where they want to go in stages, and they're not the same as everyone else's. And sometimes you will reach a point where you're sticking for a while, and it may not be as fully where you want to be, but I think if you can bed in some new behaviours and some new thinking patterns and some new ways of coping and make them habitual, you're then stronger to make the next step and the next step, and that may be more and more time off alcohol. So you can almost treat your month off booze as a bit of a base camp exercise. You know, I'm going to spend a month here getting used to this, finding out more about myself and the terrain that I'm not familiar with, or I can't remember from before I had the problem. And Janet's asking me, think about why do we want to start drinking again? Well, Janet, I quite like the imbibing of alcohol with friends. It's typically with food, so it's not sort of what I would call drinking for sport. I've been there, done that, obviously, as a student when I was a lot younger. Just terrible nights out that sort of teenagers and young people seem to do. But I just like the fact that sometimes I can feel relaxed and less inhibited socially. I'm quite an introvert, and I like meeting people and meeting new people, and I just find a couple of glasses of wine with a 3-course meal is something that I enjoy doing. And it's, you know, I'm not policing my use of wine in my life, because if it's once a week, I'm not, you know, some people would say, why do it at all? I'd say, of course, why do it at all? But those 2 glasses don't for me lead to more and buying something on the way home and then having something more at home, and then and the escalation that I know it can lead to for some people. So I guess I'm lucky, if that's appropriate, that it's something that hasn't brought me problems. Although, like I say, for a period in my life, for a year or so, it was something I had to really, really work on, because I was using it to cope with a bereavement, and my solution for that was obviously working on the bereavement issues through personal therapy. And luckily, as a psychologist, I have supervision as well, so I was able to work through it in supervision and in therapy. So obviously the solution was something more fundamental and a better foundation for getting over that problem than was kind of almost not getting over it by drinking through it. So that was a period where I certainly wasn't drinking in a healthy way. Are you Syrians? Are you think as you were thinking? So you're thinking you couldn't stop at 2, precisely, and you know yourself well enough to know that you can't. And we're all unique. Our pattern of drinking, our reasons why we use alcohol, the degree to which we have control and we discriminate over alcohol use is different. The secrets and the lies and the problems will be unique for everybody. And it's only by being honest with ourselves about what we think is possible for ourselves and letting go of, I suppose it can be a form of envy or disappointment that we've tipped, you know, for some people they've tipped over a tipping point where they'll never have that sort of, let's say, more a relaxed or laissez-faire attitude towards alcohol. But I know people now who don't really like the feeling of being out of control after one drink. They don't like what it does in their head. They feel dizzy, they feel nauseated, and as a result of that, they've never really pursued alcohol as an activity, if you like, or a substance that was appealing to them. Similarly, I have in the past tried cannabis, and I can safely say I will never, ever, ever develop a problem with cannabis because don't like it. Don't like how it makes me feel. Don't like what it makes other people like. Really not pleasant. No chance of me developing, you know, a problem with my use of that. Thank you very much. And therefore, 25 years later, or more, I haven't felt the need. And that will often be the case, is that people find substances or behaviours or things that somehow scratch an itch for them personally. It does something for them that they need, or they feel they need, or that is missing. So it's why not everyone who tries every substance will develop a problem with those substances, and why unfortunately some people do go on to pursue it because they like the feeling. And the same could be said for things like gambling or sex and other behaviours, as well as drink and drugs. So I'm still laughing about the Syrians thing, Janet. We know what we mean, don't we? It's so. I suppose we've flopped back, haven't we? Why would you take a month off? Why would you start drinking again? And if you're going to start drinking again, what's the thinking behind that? And like I said, sometimes maybe a month is a good base camp, and maybe we're building up to a bit longer, and learning as we go about what's difficult and challenging about stopping and what is so much better about stopping. I'm really sorry everyone who's kind of catching up with these stupid videos that keep dropping out. May have to watch them all back to get the full picture. But I've lost my thread. Has anyone got any questions for me, or thoughts for one another that I can share? I think that it's such a complicated topic and everyone is unique, and it's really lovely that you guys all learn from one another and support one another. And one of the things I really noticed in the Club Soda community on Facebook is that you're very good at accepting and appreciating and honouring people's difference. Difference in terms of goals, difference in terms of where drink has taken them in the past, and their solutions that have worked for some people and not for others. And I think that's the power of group support, even when that's online versus in person, because you're helping one another through sharing your story, but you're also not promoting a sort of one-size-fits-all philosophy, which can be actually what puts people off other forms of mutual aid or self-help for problems. The name of the book, it's called I think it's called The Human Givens, Givens, and I will put that on the group afterwards with a link. I'm sure I sent a client a link the other day, and there were some cheap second-hand versions on Amazon. Human Givens, and I think it's called Free from Addiction or something like that, but I'll post it after this webinar finishes. And dual diagnosis, Jill, yeah, and people with dual diagnosis often use drink or drugs to manage their mental health condition. They may never even have got to a point where they were just enjoying it or doing it normally like everyone else. Often I meet people who have always drunk or used drugs very, very heavily to manage how distressing life is for them with their mental health difficulty. And the challenge of stopping drink or drugs for those people is greater, because actually for often it has somehow been a useful coping mechanism, and then when the mental health difficulties flood back in, when drink isn't being used to manage them, they need to be really committed to following various forms of support for their mental health difficulty, whether that's a combination of therapy and medication, which for lots of people that combination is better than either of those things alone, with something like schizophrenia, chronic anxiety, clinical depression, various personality disorders, if you agree with that kind of labelling. Often combinations of medication and therapy are going to be the solution for people with more enduring mental health difficulties, and also relapsing, because sometimes that's part of it for people, but it's about limiting those and limiting the damage. And I think, you know, most people who use alcohol are aware that it changes the way they feel, and it's about, you know, being honest with ourselves. Well, why do I want to change the way I feel to this extent, this often? You know, why am I feeling in a way I don't like feeling? You know, what's the root cause of that? And that can be a lot of work, and that's a big ask, and that's a big commitment for people to make, to go, you know what, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Why am I so unhappy? Or why do I feel like I can't cope? Or why do I feel like an imposter? Why do I feel so low or so lonely? And, you know, those are really big questions, and the solutions are not, you know, super simple. And drinking for most people is a far more instantaneous solution than some of the other solutions, which are probably more healthy and will make us less kind of emotionally and cognitively vulnerable. Because I think when we do real work on ourselves without using something like alcohol to plug the holes, when we do real work on ourselves, we're actually building a much stronger foundation for ourselves. When we're using alcohol to cope, it's sort of placating things, isn't it? It's almost pressing pause. It's not moving anything on. It's putting a sort of cosy blanket over things, and then no progress is really made. So we're left with all of the vulnerabilities that we always had, the emotional and the cognitive vulnerabilities that we had. They're just sort of paused for a bit. But it's a real commitment to say, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and when I'm going to work out what's going on. I'm going to work out why I'm unhappy or whatever, and I'm going to look for other ways of coping with that. Even if it's something like, you know, people drink because of insomnia, or they say they drink because of insomnia. It's a bit like sleep training a child. You know, people know that they have to do it because eventually their life will be so much better. But the pain of doing that, it's a commitment that parents take, is that this is going to be painful, but it's worthwhile. And I think, you know, sometimes we need to sleep train ourselves as well, and not just about our sleep, but about other problems. You know, for me, I know with bereavement, for example, it's not quick, and it's not lovely to talk about a loss and to talk about a person who's gone, and to talk about your difficult relationship with them, and to try and resolve issues about a person who's no longer with you, to resolve them with in person. You know, that's a big piece of work, and it's not only time, it can often also mean money, and feeling worse before it gets better, as they say. But I would say that protects us more through life, because we have less of a vulnerability then, because we've looked at the root cause in a bit more detail. But we can only work out what the root causes are often by taking a break from booze, which I guess brings us back full circle. And a month is an excellent start, and it's a real commitment, and it's a real amazing accomplishment, particularly if you've not done it before. And even if you do a week that you've never done before, that's also amazing. The one thing I would say is, don't keep resetting the clock. If you do a day, don't give yourself permission to not do it, like the lady said earlier. But you know, if you lost 90 pounds and then you gained a pound back, you wouldn't say, I've got to go on a diet all over again, right? You've just got one, it's just 1 pound. And it's the same with this. If you have one day off when you wouldn't normally have it, write that day up somewhere. Write it on a bit of paper, write it on the fridge. I don't know. That's a day you would normally have drunk when you didn't drink. And the next time you have one of those days when you would have drunk and you didn't, write that up. And it would be lovely if they ran, consecutively. But you know what? Even if they don't, you will learn from each one of those, and each one of those will be an achievement. And cumulatively, they will also have a great effect. So don't keep resetting the clock. This is for people who are beginning their month, maybe, and for people who are looking at improving things beyond October. Keep count of your successes, and don't scratch them out just because you then have a glitch. Just keep counting, yeah, and that can be motivating as well. You can look back and, wow, in the last 100 days, I didn't drink for 50 of them. You could say that's also a good statistic. That's a good number. That's 50% of the time. Just because it wasn't 50 in a row isn't necessarily the be all and end all. And maybe that way give yourself permission to sort of flexibly approach your goals as well, and learn as you go, and not beat yourself up.